and I'm glad to say, for a celebratory lap of honor, it's the one and only Jackson Hinkle who joins us now. Jackson, what was it like sitting metaphorically in a studio with Rupert Murdoch's mouthpiece, Piers Morgan?
Well, it was quite something. I don't watch a lot of Piers Morgan, I have to admit, but I mean, to start off a conversation about the most pressing geopolitical crisis in the world right now and belittle it by calling the opposing side in this debate, myself, a Putin fanboy, it's just laughable. And I think people saw right through it. The debate on his own YouTube channel, he's got millions of followers, and the vast majority, I think it was by a factor of 4 times, people disliked his video. And it's because if there's one thing worse than, I guess, hypothetically being a Putin fanboy, as he called me, it's probably to be a Zelensky fanboy.
Well, Piers is Piers Morgan fanboy. And of course, he moves according to the wind. You're a young man, so let me educate you in this. He was our #1 ally in the British media against the war on Iraq. He disbelieved everything that the state claimed about the case for invading and occupying Iraq. But he now believes every word of the state case for the war against Russia and the destruction of the Ukrainian people in that vainglorious inglorious bid. You made I mean, you were only on there because they're having to acknowledge that actually in your country and in mine, there's rather a lot of people would prefer Putin as their leader than Joe Biden or Rishi Sunak. Isn't that right?
Yeah, it's 100% correct. And well, for you to say that Pierce used to be an ally on subjects such as the Iraq war, I mean, it's just baffling to me because I don't even think he knows what he believes in, and that's why I have to thank people like you who are sincere and honest truth tellers and have been for so long. Because I asked Pierce a simple question. I said, Pierce, if you look at your own Twitter account from February 24th, 2022 onward, there's countless tweets about Ukraine and how he prays for Ukrainians and the atrocities of Putin against the Ukrainian civilians. But if you look before February 24th, 2022, there's not a single tweet about the 15,000 people that were slaughtered in the Donbass, the primarily ethnic Russians killed at behest of NATO by the Ukrainian Nazi government. And in fact, there was one tweet about Zelensky prior to February 24th, 2022, and Piers Morgan was making fun of the comedian with no political experience having risen to the prominence of president of Ukraine. So he was actually making fun of him back then. But it just goes to show that when I asked him the question, why did you not tweet about the Ukrainian deaths prior to February 24, 2022? And he was silent. In fact, he handed the question off to his other Zelensky fanboy he had in the studio with him. I think it proves that so many of these talking heads in the mainstream press, they simply don't believe anything. They are nothing more than, as I just put it, talking heads regurgitating whatever the CIA or the State Department or MI6 have to tell them about matters like Ukraine.
Yes, they live under the dictatorship of the prevailing orthodoxy, but it's particularly sad in Piers's case because he didn't do that in the run-up to the Iraq war. And I counted him as a friend then and for many years thereafter. But as Elvis Costello said, somebody needs to put out the big light. I can't bear to see him this way. But you actually trounced him in the debate because you're a very, very brilliant young man. So much so, you're now an ambassador. And I want to ask you about that. It is quite something that North Korea, for so long shunned by East and West, let's face it, the Chinese and the Russians were nominally allied with North Korea, but they kept it at arm's length. But Shoigu, the Russian defense minister, was given a rock star welcome in Pyongyang this week. And it's quite obvious to me, reading the lines and between the lines, that North Korea is about to move quite significantly into, if you like, the new world that is being formed by this UN reconfiguration of the planet. And you are volunteering to be a goodwill ambassador, and good for you being a goodwill ambassador, because why should we be enemies of North Korea?
We shouldn't be. We shouldn't be. And I think many people across the world understand all the good that Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-un have done for the world. Kim Jong-un is a peace-seeking leader, despite what, the talking heads, again, at CNN and Fox News and MSNBC say about him. They make him sound like some insane, tyrannical, authoritarian, bloodthirsty tyrant that can do nothing right in the world. But when you actually look at videos of Westerners, Australians, UK citizens, anyone who travels to the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, you see something that's actually exactly opposite to what Hollywood portrays in the movies of North Korea. And you begin to understand that what Donald Trump was trying to do, strike a peace deal with North Korea and begin to normalize relations with North Korea, is actually a good, necessary step, because Russia and China understand that, like Africa, North Korea is a part of this new world, this new formation, this new century that we're living in. And they are people just like us, created by God, and we should be working with them to industrialize the world, create a more peaceful world, and a more hopeful world for all of our nations.
Well, I've been there twice. I haven't met Kim Jong-un, but I've been to North Korea twice, and it is a very fascinating place, unique society. And I hope that you have success in your attempts to foster more goodwill. But I can't show any goodwill towards Joe Biden, I must tell you. As I look at the circus in Washington and see the consequence, I mean, it may have started out just as a grift for the Bidens to make a pile for the future after Joe left the White House as vice president to President Obama. But look what it's turned into. It has corrupted the US Constitution, and it has begotten a war. And now they're trying to arrest Hunter Biden's business partner before he can get to Congress tomorrow to give evidence of the Biden crime family's activities. Will they succeed in that, or will we hear from him tomorrow?
I guess we'll have to wait and see. But if recent history is any indication for how this is all going to unfold, let's just take a look at the U.S. judicial system and how the prosecutors in New York and D.C. truly operate. Because Donald Trump has been, given a litany of charges for crimes that I think a bunch of Americans would dispute the validity of. And all the while, Donald Trump has been charged left and right. It seems like every other week he's getting arrested now. We still have none of the Jeffrey Epstein associates who have been held accountable for their crimes. We have SBF of FTX, who looks like he's going to get off the hook for his crimes. And as you just mentioned, they're now trying to do this and protect Hunter Biden and ultimately protect Joe Biden, who is in this fanatical war craze, clamoring for World War III with Russia, just in an effort, I don't know, maybe to protect what he did at this point with Burisma Holdings Group and what they were doing with Hunter Biden with Burisma. And another part of this that a lot of people forget is Hunter Biden was not only involved with Burisma Holdings in Ukraine, but he also was a massive, massive investor for a lot of these U.S.-operated biolabs, former Soviet weapons labs in Ukraine. And he was getting special approval from the DOD while Joe Biden was vice president overseeing U.S.-Ukrainian relations. There's a lot of suspect stuff here. And I think the Burisma payment of $83,000 a month to Hunter Biden is just the tip of the iceberg.
Now, of course, the man who allowed the Bidens to run Ukraine was Obama. Because he looked cool in a tan suit and did a passable Sam Cooke from the stage in Chicago when he was first elected, a lot of people cut him a lot of slack, far more than they ought. But I'm wondering why this week we have a situation where the second Obama chef dies by drowning. Obama and his wife go playing tennis in a ritzy country club not 48 hours after the death by drowning in their garden of their 7-year employee, and Barack is wearing plasters on his hand and sporting a black eye. I'm wondering why that is not the biggest story in America right now. Why?
Well, that's the exact behavior of someone who simply doesn't care about the death of their longtime friend and chef. And it's so in your face at this point. Yes, the question must be asked, why is no one talking about this? And I think the last phone call you had with one of your guests summarizes what so many are thinking, at the end of the day, Joe Biden is not polling very high right now, especially when you put him head-to-head against Donald Trump, even in the Rust Belt and the swing states of the United States, which are so critical for winning a presidential election. And I think a lot of people understand that the Democratic Party would love to see someone like Michelle Obama run for office, run for president of the United States to replace Joe Biden, who's sputtering out on his last fumes right now. And, you got to clean up a few untied ends if you're going to run for president of the United States and you have as much dirt on you as I'm sure the Obamas do. So it's not to say that they're guilty, but when you look at these photos that are up by my face on the screen right now, I mean, you have Obama walking around with what appears to be a black eye. He's got presumably cuts on his fingers covered by medical tape. Where did that come from? And why are they so okay with the notion of just flaunting the fact that this looks extremely suspect and that they don't care?
Yeah, it would look extremely suspect if it were Donald Trump that had lost the second of his chefs and was playing golf 2 days later and with a black eye and wearing tape on his hand. Now, finally, Jackson, I'm grateful for your time. If it's not Obama, Mrs. Obama, not sure what her credentials would be, except being married to a former president. I suppose it's a 2-for-1, buy one, get one free, a way of Barack also to be back in the White House. If it's not them, it's going to be this California fellow, isn't it? This Gavin Newsom, about whom most people this side of the pond know very little. Can you enlighten us?
Yeah, he's someone who's got very high presidential ambitions, although I don't think he's going to be polling that high with the American public, given what has happened to California. George, I just moved out of Los Angeles because the situation has become so grim. I'm a California native. I grew up in Orange County, and I moved up to Los Angeles about 2.5 years ago. And it's just insane to see what has happened to our state, the most beautiful state in the union. and now it looks like a video game zombie wasteland. It's horrific. It's so sad. We have 600 to 700,000 homeless Americans. 10% of those are veterans who served our country abroad. Meanwhile, Joe Biden sending $200 billion off to Ukraine, and Gavin Newsom, though he has no say on this because he's a governor of the state of California, I'm sure he applauds and supports all these ambitions of Biden to send more money to Ukraine when his own state is crumbling. Okay. Now, someone who's polling much higher is someone who actually, in the Democratic Party, who rejects the Democratic Party orthodoxy, is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I have issues I disagree with him vehemently on, of course, and I'm sure you do as well, like on Israel, for example. But don't you think it's interesting to see someone who is so in opposition to the stated goals of the Democratic National Committee, the Democratic Party, and nearly all Democratic elected officials across the nation polling at 20% in the party? I don't think Gavin Newsom is going to win the Democratic nomination if he does in fact seek it. He's running ads in Florida right now. I've seen those. By virtue of his great ideas or his good looks, I think it will be a gerrymandering of the process, just like we saw with Hillary Clinton becoming the nominee back in 2016 when Bernie Sanders was polling so high.
And what can you make of President Biden refusing security detail from the state for Bobby Kennedy, when actually the system of giving protection to people running for president only was invented after the murder of Bobby Kennedy's father? Who in the Democratic Party can support refusing protection for somebody called Robert Kennedy?
It seems like a weaponization of our own, our own law enforcement agencies in the United States to try and stifle the success of his main political opponent within the Democratic Party. But then again, is it really that out of character for someone like Joe Biden, who has sicked big tech thugs on any and all opposition in the free and open media independent press? Is it really all that much of something that's out of character for someone like Joe Biden when he's sicking federal prosecutors on his main and number one opposition that's looking like it's going to beat him, that is Donald Trump in the Republican field? No, I don't think it is. And I think, frankly, as grim and dark as it is, Joe Biden would probably love to see Robert F. Kennedy Jr. end up like his own father or like his uncle, JFK, in their very, very sad and tragic demise.